So what was the reasons for the Harrier to be posted in Germany at this time?
Well, if we just go back a bit and ask ourselves, what was it for? What was the Harrier for? And I noticed in some of the comments, one or two people made some disparaging remarks, and actually they missed the whole point of the Harrier. And even in those days, that was the earlier Mark I Harrier. And the idea was that airfields were liable to be bombed. Now, that didn't matter to a Harrier to some extent, because it had a short takeoff, so what? It wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. But, of course, if you bombed it, or in its hazard, they didn't have hazards, that was the big point, but they had revetments and things like that. Then, you couldn't get out of there, basically. So the whole idea was to have an aircraft that was able to operate outside of an airfield, and it was able to operate off grass and often did. So now what that did too was that you could go very close to the front line, and as we'll find out, it was very close. It was 5 minutes flying time or something like that. Now, for that reason, it didn't need a lot of range. And it would be nice to carry more, obviously. There's no such thing as having, too much to carry. But yeah, you didn't need the fuel. You just loaded it up with weapons, go 5 minutes, come back, and you're off. So that was the principle of the aeroplane. Now, into peacetime, they operated off airfields, obviously. Made life a lot easier. So in Germany, what happened was, whereas at number 1 Squadron, we came off the OCU and then we went and did sort of trials type work and stuff I mentioned in a previous interview, trying out things to see how they go. And 2 things, which I didn't mention at the time, which we knocked on the head pretty sharpish. And one was doing engine off landings, or attempts at engine off landings. If I was to say you were required to be 15,000 feet downwind, so you need to have a 15,000 foot cloud base for openness, and then you could come around. Now, the practice we did, and I don't remember, probably using a fair bit of flap to single, with idle power. It was doable. Reasonably. You had a fair old rate of descent, but you could do it. But it was knocked on the head when a test pilot did it for real and crashed. And as a consequence, they said, I'll tell you what, knock it on the head. And that was the end of it. You just rejected. And the second thing was, again, seems odd now, standing here in this sort of very safety-conscious environment these days. One of the things we did do, and I went with the boss on the very first one, was to do pairs landings in fields. And that was okay. You could do it, but when we looked at the pictures and saw how difficult it was to have an airplane half wing-borne, half jet-borne flight formating on another airplane, they said, I'll tell you what, knock it on the head. We'll leave it at that. So that was that one out of the way. So, and that went the same as formation hovering.
Right, yeah.
So there we operated bits of this sort of stuff, Harrier stuff, Harrier, and we didn't do what it was actually meant to do, particularly. And when we did deploy, we didn't deploy out into the field. We deployed to Norway, northern Norway.
All right.
Now, we still went into tents and things like that. Well, one notable occasion at -20 overnight in Bardufoss, and all the locals came out and took photographs of these crazy Brits in tents in this terrible weather when the officers' mess was open and heated. Anyway, so, but by the time we got to Germany, then this started to work fully. So we everybody did their work up, and then we started going out into the field. And instead of being a single squadron going out, all 3 squadrons would go together. Okay, so all 3 would go together. All of the 3 had 2 sites, and it was negotiated, how I don't know because I didn't organise it, that tanks from the Brits, the Germans and the US when they were doing their manoeuvres, we would do this as well, so that we had targets to go to,
Yeah.
and a war going on somewhere, and one of those three would be designated as the enemy, and you know, that's important, because you've got to be able to look at a tank and say straight away, that's the good guy and not the bad guy.
Yeah.
And actually we did a lot of work on this, so we were pretty good at it.